Despite downpours and delays at Donington, we finally got 3 full races. This is the Donington Review.
Hello everybody and welcome back. Yes, it is a Donington Review, and given the delays we had yesterday, we'll waste no time about it. We'll get straight into the podcast. We'll deal with the racing first and we'll discuss at the end our thoughts on the day. We were of course there, and so we'll run through our take on how the day went, what the delays meant trackside, etc. But we'll get straight into the racing first and foremost. And we had a new qualifying session layout style for this year. Sam, you've covered that for us.
Yeah, so if you haven't seen it already, we've had on our season preview, I did a little flow chart diagram of how the new Quick 6 qualifying session will lay out for each round this season. So the results from FP2, you will take the odd finishing cars and the even finishing cars, and you'll split them into 2 10-minute sessions, of which the top 6 drivers from each session will then go into a Q2 session, and the bottom drivers in each of those will then form 13 downwards on the grid, respectively of the times they set in both sessions. The second session will then have another knockout round, again 10-minute session, and the top 6 will go through to a top 6 shootout, which will then decide the top 6 on the grid. So it was a bit of a minefield of how to get it all sorted out, and there were some drivers that fell foul of it this weekend. So Group 1 included Ingram, and the rain started to spit and fall at the start of the first session. So it was all a bit going into the unknown, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was mixed conditions for the race, for the qualifying session, and of course, given the short time turnaround and the fact that the session is split in 2, different race conditions in one session could really affect where you were on the grid if those conditions improved in the second session.
Yeah, so Group 1 were significantly slower than those in Group 2, and decisions to whether to run the dry or the wet tyre were changed midway through the session as to what the right tyre was going to be. Unfortunately, Halstead went off halfway through the session and was out. He didn't recover to set any time at all, and it seemed like it was getting wetter and wetter. But, however, the track did majorly improve towards the end, meaning that Camish was probably the main casualty here, and Napa didn't actually get him back out onto circuit with enough time to get round to start a fast-flying lap. He had already set a lap previously, but it wasn't going to be quick enough to get him through. So Camish, Morgan as well, had the same instance, came in to swap tyres, wasn't quick enough. Moffat and Halstead all went out of Q1. Now, moving on to Q2, it had dried up at this point. However, they'd just seen all the cars in Q1 go out on the wet tyre and set the times they needed. So again, there was an issue over tyre choice going into this session. But one car didn't even get out for the session, and that was former Btcc champion Rob Huff. His car was not out in the pit lane ready for when all 20 drivers started Q1, which was the crucial point. They were still fixing damage on the car, and he needed to be out there with all the rest of the drivers, not just for the start of his part of the session, which he fell foul to, and the teams fell foul to as well. That, for me, is a team error. Most of them were on wets, but it looked like it was going to be a crossover session, 2 dries, and it was actually Cook and Smiley who, first of all, went onto those slick tyres, but meanwhile, De Leon was cooking. He was looking very quick in this first session. When the timer was up at the end of the session, he was 3rd fastest. However, he did fall down slightly, but still got through, which was really impressive for him in his first Quick 6 qualifying session of the season. As we know, Rob Huff was already out. Sumpton, again, new driver to the grid, was getting to grips with the Cupra. He was out as well, along with Chilton and Rowbottom. Napa not looking good in the first opening stages of the weekend. Moving on then into the top 12 shootout, so the second full session. BMWs were looking quick, and Tim Harvey noticed this, didn't he, all weekend?
That and the hybrids were his hot words of the weekend, as you would expect.
Yeah, so because they didn't have to come in and swap over their tyres, they were always going to build their lap times and build and gradually get quicker and quicker. Whereas we know those front-wheel drive front-wheel drive cars have got to come in to switch their tyres over. They came in, they waste a lot of time really in that session. Being so short, they're only going to get maybe 2 flying laps in, whereas the BMWs will do 4 or 5. Osborne, however, had a accident in this session. Had a spin coming out of the old hairpin, which caused a red flag and significant damage to the car. He would be out of the session, and there were 3 minutes left to restart the session. The BMWs were able to improve lap on lap, as I said, and some of them stuck in. But it was Aaron Taylor-Smith, Mikey Doble, Josh Cook, Osborne, as I mentioned, De Leon and Smiley out in this session. So going through to the top 6 qualifying session, we had the usual candidates: Ingram, Sutton, Turkington, Hill, but also Watson and Pearson. Sutton was the first to set a sub 1 minute 8 lap, which Ingram then bettered by half a hundredth. There was a big double lock up from Hill, and he wouldn't improve to go anywhere above 4th. And Pearson gave a really good accounting of himself, although a little further off in the times to get into that quick 6 session. He finished 5th overall. So it'd be Ingram to take pole just from Ash Sutton, Turkington 3rd, Hill in 4th, Pearson 5th, and Watson 6th. It was a long session, wasn't it?
It was a long update from you there. Yeah, I've aged 12 years, so thank you. We probably won't be covering qualifying in as much detail as the season goes on because, as you heard there, it just takes forever because it is now long. I will ask you very quickly, how do you feel the session works? Do you think it's an improvement to the sport?
I think it is an improvement. I think also the weather this weekend helped, and I think it made teams realise that they had a very short amount of time to actually get 2 or 3 flying laps in each session, and they're really going to have to make those count.
Yeah, there's very little room for error. I think the only question mark I have is that if you have 2 sessions that are completely different weather-wise, then you are pretty much unable to progress through no fault of your own, given that the sessions are split on FP1 time, so FP2 times into odds and evens. There's no, yeah, that's luck. That's
Yeah.
pure luck.
Yeah.
To be honest, if you can't affect that at all. So my only worry comes, as I say, is if we get one dry part Q1A, one wet Q1B, because you're never going to be able to get past Q1 if you're in the wet set. It's as simple as that. But
Well, it is important to realise that the top 6 from each of those sessions goes through, so lap times aren't as important, but those slower ones in one of the sessions will probably be behind the slower ones in the other session if the weather is that much different.
Yeah, but that also means they will be in the back part 6 of the grid because there'll be no way if they're in wet conditions that they'll be able to get into the top 6 of the back 6. Yes. It's all very complex.
It is.
It's going to take a lot getting used to.
I'll tell you what, we might have to do a 10 minutes with on it.
We'll see, let's get a couple more under our belt and we'll see how we go. Anyway, we'll go to race 1. I don't want to cause too many delays to schedule because I'm already, after the weekend, I'm very anti-delays to schedule, as we'll get to. So, race 1 at the slightly later than advertised time in the afternoon. Slightly. Yeah, we'll come on to my thoughts and then we'll do it at the end. Let's go for the racing first. So, obviously, it took a long time to get started. There was rivers down the old hairpin, which was the biggest problem of the day. That was probably the part of the track that was the least safe. When we did eventually get going, it was a bit of a driver's nightmare, really, because it was a drying track, which meant that everyone had to start on wets because there was still standing water. But as the race would progress, that would get dry. The wets would start becoming into 50p pieces. And as Ingram put it on the grid, it'd be like cutting butter with a wooden spoon, which... Yeah, so it's a little bit of a driver's nightmare. I am slightly surprised that during the race, given the long safety car we had, as we'll come to in a moment, nobody gambled for slicks during that period. But I think that everyone was a little bit cautious, given that it had been a long delay. And of course, if another safety car came out, those slicks would be completely pointless because you wouldn't be able to. You can't overtake under a safety car, obviously, unless you're Lance Stroll and you're looking at a corner ahead.
I don't think they were quite expecting the safety car to be that long. Obviously, there was an injury to one of the staff there that caused it to be longer than expected, for the type of accident that it was. So I think if people have realised that, then they may have gambled sooner because they'd have been able to stay on the back of the pack and keep warm for those slick tyres. And yeah, possibly
That said, safety cars breed
hindsight.
safety cars, and if you
Yeah,
get another one a lap later, you're not going to get any use out of those tyres anyway. So.
yeah,
But yeah, all cars started on wets. Sutton had the worst start of the front runners, bogging down, lots of wheel spin. Ingram managed to do pretty well in the conditions for a front wheel drive car. We're going to have a conversation at some point about the BMW starts off the line. They've always been good, but boy, they looked incredibly good this weekend.
I did.
Even more so in race 2 and 3, which we'll get to in the drier conditions. The race was pretty much neutralised almost straight away. Osborne off hard down the Craners. I can imagine before going out, they're all told, "Look, lads, it's been a really difficult morning. Everyone's tired, cold, and wet. We just want to get some racing underway now. Nothing silly in the opening laps." Osborne, hold my beer. Although in fairness to Osborne, nothing he could do. He was tapped by Aaron Taylor-Smith. It looked like another napper was involved in tapping Taylor-Smith. We'd never really got a conclusive replay. The spray made didn't help in making it clear. Racing instant lap 1 for me, unfortunately.
From what I've seen of what replays there have been, it looks like he just gets unsettled on that inside curb as you go down the Craners,
I
which
think he gets
shoves him.
tapped.
Oh, really?
I think a Vauxhall taps the back of him. But whether that Vauxhall got tapped himself, I don't know. If only all the cars had onboards so we could see what was happening in each one.
Yeah.
I could be completely wrong, and there's no penalties that have been handed out for that incident after the race, so he could have lost it on his own. But there was a lot of cars in and around him on cold tyres, off the start, on the wettest part of the track. Yeah. I think he got touched, but I couldn't tell you definitively. Obviously, you say he went hard into the tyre barrier, which meant that we had to have a tyre barrier delay. Unfortunately, one of the circuit staff broke their leg or ankle during this fixing period. Looks like they slipped on the grass and
yes,
rolled and snapped their ankle.
From what we could see, it was unfortunate. The ground was extremely soft, and even the Manitou diggery thing that they were using to help lift those big, heavy rubber belts that go on the outside of the tyres was almost getting stuck. So turning your ankle, or even worse, breaking it in those conditions is unfortunate, but I'm not sure what much more you can do.
No, all we can do is just wish the person involved a very speedy recovery. Sutton did manage to get a good move done on Colin before the safety car lights. Perhaps caught Colin slightly out as Colin was preparing for the race to be neutralised, but you're allowed to overtake until that light comes on your dash.
Yep.
We then settled in for a long period of safety cars. I say nobody came in and gambled on slicks. I kind of get it for the reasons I said, but equally, if you're somebody who's at the back of the grid out position like a Huff or a Camish, I'm slightly surprised they didn't take the risk. But
something that you mentioned at the time as well. Of course, they wouldn't have seen the injury coming, but would it have been better to stop the race to get that all sorted out as in a neutral environment, rather than the people possibly rushing around to try and get it sorted? Obviously, we don't know exactly what went on down there and whether it was people rushing around trying to get it sorted that caused the accident.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too far into my rant because I want to keep viewers interested for that. But what I will say is that you've got somebody injured who can't move at the wettest part of the circuit where the grass is like ice, and you've still got cars going around there. That even a safety car could drop it and go off. I'm amazed. What once the injury became clear for the actual retrieving of the car and putting the tyre barrier back, fine. I understand that. Okay. Yeah. When it's apparent there's actually someone down there who's injured, I'm amazed they didn't red flag the race and just get that sorted under completely neutral conditions. And you can say, well, the safety car neutralised the race. It does, but anyone who hasn't seen the Lance Stroll incident in China a couple of weeks ago in the F1 shows you can still have an accident under the safety car. It's not impossible. And then, as I said, you know my thoughts about I don't like snatch vehicles on circuit when cars go around, even under safety car, but I understand you can't red flag every single time a car goes off track because you never get racing in. I get that. But once it's become apparent that somebody is hurt and is requiring to be stretched out of there, to me, that's a red flag. But it's not the first decision I think that the course got wrong this weekend, as we'll get to.
Yep.
Anyway, when we did eventually get going, that was pretty much the race done. Huff was having a nice time until Rowbottom decided that he was going to go temping bowling with a Vauxhall and took Huff off into the gravel. Rowbottom did get reprimanded for that afterwards, so he's opened up his touring car steward's bus loyalty card early. He's received 2 penalty points for that, which. Yeah.
And he also got a 3-place grid drop for race 2, although it didn't matter because of the damage that he caused to himself. He was going to be at the back anyway.
Yeah, so yeah, it wasn't a good start of the weekend for Robot. He was struggling in race 1 as it was, and I say that move, it was never on. It was like bowling, and it was just very poor. And Huff was the person who suffered because he got sent off into the gravel trap. As you say, he would then be Robot. This would then get the meatball flag anyway because he had his bonnet flapping. Came into the pits, used 2 rolls of gaffer tape, and the thing blew open half a lap later. And actually, the Napa bonnet was flapping around all weekend on all 4 cars, which is a concern this early in the season.
Yeah, they might need to buy some stronger bonnet pins for that. Certainly, if they're going to be rubbing that much.
Then the only real sort of last bit to mention here is that Sutton made a good move on Hill as his tyres went off. Ingram got through with a little bit of hip and shoulder, which that was further in the start of the race. And then Sutton made a good move when the tyres started to fall away for Hill and he got through. Nothing really to say on that. It was a pass down the chicane, fairly simple. That, for me, sums up race 1. The only thing to do is a little bit of post-race admin, and that's to say that Adam Morgan received a 10-second penalty for jumping the start. So not a good start for him either. And because of the late safety car and the fact the field hadn't had a chance to spread, that really did damage him for race 2.
Yeah, I think it dropped him from 8th down to 14th, which was unfortunate. But up till then, him and Camish had been making good progress through the field as they both started right down the back after qualifying on Saturday.
I think that sums up race 1. Have I missed anything that you'd like to go back and cover?
Not that I've got written down on my notes.
Excellent. Right, shall we move on to race... Oh, well, I suppose actually what I should do is confirm the race 1 results. That is probably a good place to start, isn't it? So the top 10 for race number 1, Tom Ingram from Ash Sutton from Jake Hill in the podium places, Colin Turkerton, Ronan Pearson, Josh Cook. Pearson does well there to hold 5th, although never really looked to be challenged either from behind or in front.
Oh.
Aaron Taylor-Swift 7th, Dan Camish 8th, Aidan Moffat, solid top 10 finish in 9th, and Andrew Watson, who went backwards during this race, finished in 10th.
Yes. So then, on to race 2. As I'd already mentioned, Rowbottom's 3-place grid drop didn't make too much of a difference. It just put him back another space on the grid. Sam Osborne would not be getting out for this race due to the damage that he incurred in race 1 with hitting that tyre barrier. He hit it quite hard, although it was side on to the vehicle, so hopefully it didn't cause him too much injury. Sutton, again, poor start. Poor start from Sutton. Don't know whether it was too much wheel spin or whether it looks worse because of how well the BMWs are starting at the moment. But both Turkington and Hill made...
Oh no, Sutton described his start afterwards as, for the RTV cameras, rubbish, but he would use another word if he could. So, it was a poor start, absolutely.
So, yeah, Hill managed to get up into P1 for the start, or pretty much into the first corner of this race, getting past Ingram, who, considering being front-wheel drive, had made a decent start himself. Into the first lap then, and Turkington made a big lock-up into McLean's, where Cook would get past him and have a pretty solid race for Josh Cook standards. Watson, again, started falling back through the field. I don't know whether it was a setup issue this weekend or whether he hasn't found the confidence in the car, but he seemed to really struggle with race pace this weekend.
Yeah, agreed.
Pearson went off wide at the exit of Coppice midway through the race. Didn't see any replays as to whether he got nudged or whether he just ran wide himself.
It was a power steering issue.
Yeah, that'll cause you problems.
Which is why when the steering failed, he decided to go for a bit of sailing instead.
Yes, he did go boating, didn't he?
He did.
Extraordinary amount of water on the outside on the grass there.
Which is why the pit X entry was so wet for the rest of the weekend. At the time, we couldn't work it out, but it was because he dumped all that water in the pit entry.
Yeah. He turned into a boat and dragged a load of water onto the back straight as well when he rejoined. He did obviously have to go into the pits after that. Huff had good pace in race one until he got nudged off by Rowbottom and Dobble combined. And in race two, he started fighting back once again. So he seems to be fairly well at home with that Toyota
Mm-hmm.
and linking up with it nicely. He managed to finish ninth overall pretty much again from the back of the grid. Chilton had a fuel pump failure on lap 12, black smoke billowing out the back of the car, and him apparently being lost from the pack when he came back round to us. We later found out that, yeah, it was a mechanical issue for him. And then on lap 14, Hill got passed by Ingram. A nice cutback move coming through Redgate almost seemed to catch Hill napping. Hill went on to say after the race had finished that his rear tyres were going off at this point. He seems to have a good car for the first half of the race, but hasn't found that ideal setup yet to be able to have that longevity throughout the race.
And
Sutton was then.
he said as much afterwards as well. He did say that he was quite frustrated that they've made a lot of changes and they're not on top of it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, considering at least 3 test days, you'd have thought they'd have fine tuned and honed in on what that would be.
The only problem with that is that you can think you're doing really well, and then you go up against other teams that have you can't measure that during a test day.
No.
The only way of measuring that is on the circuit.
Yep.
And I think that there's already a very clear division in my mind showing in the field this weekend that those 3 are going to be the 3 for the championship, and they are streets ahead of everybody else. Ahead of everybody else. I will say, just going back to Huff for a second, that I think that you really can see his class as a race driver this weekend. He is a real asset to the championship. He's not going to be a contender this year. I don't think he is, but he will definitely be scoring a podium, if not higher, this year. I've got no doubt about that.
Yes. Sutton then made an opportunistic move on Hill as his tyres were going off down into the old hairpin. He knew he needed to strike while the iron was hot and make sure that Ingram wouldn't get too far away from him, with the possibility of maybe getting him later in the race. However, that didn't happen. Ingram comfortably built about a second and a half gap at the front. Sutton brought the car home in second with Hill in third. As you say, those 3 drivers were just that class above, with Josh Cook, Camish and Turkington following in another little battle pack behind them. But as Sutton's car came across the line, there was quite an extensive amount of smoke, shall we say.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is that you've got 2 of the arguably top 3 teams this weekend, all with various mechanical trouble. You've obviously got the Napa bonnet, Ash Sutton's car having a bit of a fit at the end of race 2.
Yep.
Pearson had power steering problems in 2 of the 3 races. Chilton had mechanical problems all weekend.
Yep.
Halstead went off on his own in race 2. I don't know if it was mechanical or a mistake. It's difficult to know. We've not seen the replay or had anything out of it, but it makes you wonder, given the other problems they've had.
Nothing was made of it either, because he managed to recover it and get it back on track. I don't think there was even any coverage.
No, exactly that. We only saw him go off track because we were stood where he went off track in race 2. Yeah, and then I'm not sticking the boot in while the man is down, but Pearson came out about half a lap behind Halstead and caught him passing through the race. Now, is that just because Pearson's quicker, or was Halstead carrying a problem? Given the problems that Accelerate had with the other 2 cars, it makes you wonder whether there was a problem with Halstead's car as well.
Yeah, Pearson in race 2 actually set the fastest lap, having had that issue, and then come back out. Yes, he finished 17th, but he still picked up that point, which could be crucial later in the season. At the end of the race, did you see the interviews and the little bit that Ingram was doing with Steve Ryder about drawing the balls?
Yeah.
How many times has Ingram managed to call who is getting pole? It's scary, isn't it?
I'm not getting my tinfoil hat out over this, but it was unusual. There's only really one thing I think you've missed from race 2, which I just want to quickly touch on, is that Ingram looks a lot more bolshy this year. Sutton obviously tried to get past him early in the race, and Ingram very, very, very much put his elbows out and put Sutton wide twice and slammed the door in a way that I've not seen Ingram do before. Not this early in the season anyway. When it's come to crunch time, fine. But I've not seen him. It's almost as if he's gone, do you know what? A, I'm very determined, but B, I'm going to have to be hard on you from the start this year because we all know what you're capable of doing and how good you are. But I've not seen Ingram do that this early in the season before. And if that's something to cut, if that's a sign of what's to come, this could be a gargantuan battle for supremacy this season.
Do you know what was really nice to see afterwards, though? Is Sutton is right up for it as well.
Oh God, yeah,
He was
he
like,
will want.
"Yeah, fair play." I that to me or to him was touring car racing. That
Yeah,
is exactly how it should be done. A little bit of door banging, a few touches here and there, and if you push me wide, okay, I need to make a better move next time, kind of thing.
yeah. And while he will be happy to have won the title last year, I think he'd have preferred the other three where there's been a bigger battle.
Yeah,
Personally, I could be completely wrong,
yeah,
but I think that generally you prefer a title to take the predictions that we do. For example, when it's been nip and tuck all season, you come out on top. That's sweeter than dominating, isn't it?
yes, yes, it is. It's not just the predictions we do for this; we do predictions with football as well, and we're still battling with those towards the end of the season anyway, aren't we?
One last point from race two. It's just something
Yep.
that I don't know if it's going to be every weekend, but Hill and Sutton did have cameras on their car this year because they were being shown in little boxes throughout the race. So where it was down
Okay.
the left-hand side,
Yep.
where the positions are, there was a little box with Hill and Sutton at one point when they were catching each other,
Yep.
where you could see through the back of Sutton's car, through the front of Hill's car. Now, if that's going to be something every weekend, excellent. If that's just
Okay.
luck of the draw this weekend and we're still doing what we did before, not so excellent. But yeah, hopefully that's something else that they've listened to us over and have decided to implement, just like TikTok and colour schemes and other bits and pieces.
So just to sum up the final top 10 for race 2, Ingram won from Ash Sutton from Jake Hill. Josh Cook finished 4th with Turkington in 5th and Dan Camish in 6th. Adam Morgan got back up to 7th with Aidan Moffat in 8th. As I said, Rob Huff in 9th and Dan Rowbottom up in 10th.
And no penalties in penalty corner for race 2, so they all behaved
Well done,
themselves very
people.
nicely. Well done. Well done. Right, should we go on to race 3? As you've alluded there, it was Rob Huff's number that was pulled out of the bowl in exchange for 500 large ones that Donington allegedly.
Allegedly, yes.
Allegedly. Morgan made a great start off the line and rocketed into the first. Let's talk about it. It's the elephant in the room at the minute. It is the hot topic on a lot of the forums this morning. Is that boost off the line too much? Does it need reducing as the season goes on? It's the age-old debate that happens every season with BMW. Is it too powerful off the line?
Off the line, you would think so looking at the 3 race starts we've had this weekend.
Yeah,
However, if they're burning their rear tyres like you see throughout the race, then it's all very well being strong in the first part of the race. But if you can't hold the drivers off in the second part of the race, then you're going to fall back through the field.
yeah,
I quite liked the balance this weekend.
yeah.
I think as the results came, they were right for how each car has performed and how each driver has performed.
I fully agree with you. I have to say, I
I'm
think that no, that was the point I was going to make. That it is a bit of a leveler. That okay, they got off the line well,
yeah,
but actually, no BMW won this weekend, despite having led all 3 races at one point. I think
yeah,
Hill did lead a bit in race 1, didn't he? For a
yeah.
little
Very
bit off the
short
line.
amount at the
Yeah,
start.
so all 3 races were led by a rear-wheel drive car and not won by a rear-wheel drive car, and the highest they finished across the weekend was second.
Yeah.
And actually, that was in doubt for quite a lot of race 3 towards the end as well. So I think we need to see what happens over the next couple of races to really decide if that boost needs turning down off the line. For now, I wouldn't get too worried. I think that there is a balance, as you say, that negates that as the race goes on.
Do you know what I would slightly add to that? It was a cold weekend, wasn't it, at Donington? I wonder if the BMW is going to struggle a lot more with rear tyres when we get into the warmer months, say Snetterton, Thruxton, Croft, of where we're going to see warm weather. If those rear tyres go off even quicker when they're warm, then there could be issues for the BMW.
Yeah, I mean, a lot will really depend on what compound they're running at the time. Obviously, we've got a
Yes.
lot of different tyre rules this year, which we'll cover in the brands preview because it wasn't in play this weekend. So we'll cover that in the brands preview. Um, yeah, at the minute, I think everyone needs to just calm down. It's the first 3 races, one of which was wet to dry. The other 2 were on greasy tracks. Even if they were dry, they'd still be greasy. Let's see what happens to brands as long as it doesn't rain because we can't race in the rain at tracks, as we'll get to.
Hold
Okay, so hold up. Yeah, so Morgan, great start, but then Turkson locked up straight away, which is interesting. That means that in all three races, BMW's locked up on cold tyres in the opening laps. An awful start by Camish, which I can't give any rhyme or reason to because it wasn't picked up on the coverage. Sadly, he just went backwards for some reason. I'm going to assume it was a poor start off the line, but it's difficult to tell due to
He,
lack of coverage.
he started something like P4, and by the time he got round to us, we were standing at the final chicane. I think he was P10 or P11, and I just couldn't understand it.
Yeah, we then get to the first major talking point, probably of the weekend, actually, in terms of overtakes. Sutton with a huge swing and dummy on Hill, where he checked to the outside and then checked to the inside into turn number one, made Hill move over to defend. Inside opened up. When I say the inside opened up, the door was being very slowly opened, and then Sutton inserted one of those crowbars
Crowbars.
or battering rams that the police use on drug raids to get through there. For me, this has caused a lot of anger and debate as well to the style of the overtake. To me, it's just about on the limit. I know people will say you're a Sutton fan, you're going to say that. If he had got a penalty for it, I wouldn't have been surprised, and I wouldn't really have been too up in arms about it. It's one of those where it probably is just about okay. Sutton did get damaged from it, and Hill did sort of hit him back in a bit of retaliation, maybe. But I have to say, was the move really on? For me, probably not, if I'm being totally honest.
We may well get to it later in the race, but it sounds a little bit similar to the amount of momentum, shall we say, that Hill gave Ingram into the final S's when he had to cut the chicane.
I think Sutton's is worse.
Okay.
Personally, and he sets the move up lovely. The swing to the outside is brilliant. It does exactly what you, and he's so good at cutting underneath, where he just leaves a millimeter between his front bumper and your rear bumper to get underneath you. He's so good at that. We've seen it. That's almost a Sutton trademark move. It's fantastic, but for me, the door wasn't open enough, and yeah, it's an old-fashioned aggressive touring car move, and it's one that you don't want to see outlawed if you're a real fan of the sport, or a bit of an older fan of the sport, maybe.
I wonder.
But
So Sutton did a
yeah,
little interview with Louise before the race weekend started. I think it was on the Saturday, and he said with the new rules, regulations, and the change in the hybrid, changing the tyre regulations, we might see a bit more of the old Ash, and I'd probably
yeah.
classify that as the old Ash.
Absolutely, and look, he's worried. He mentioned throughout the weekend that the tyre changes are going to affect them. The hybrid, and I would agree. The hybrid, on evidence of this weekend, does seem to be making a huge difference.
Yeah.
And obviously, he will be without it for a lot of the season because he wants to be at the front, and that is the punishment, if you like, for running at the front. So yeah, we might see if a chance comes, he's going to take it because that's his best chance he's going to feel to get past. I'll be very interested to hear what listeners feel about that move in particular because it, for me, was the one of the weekend that could go either way.
Yeah.
De Leon was then off down the crane of curves. He lost it on his own, no contact with anybody else, just lost it on cold rears by the look of it. A shame because he had a solid weekend up to that point.
Very.
But he's a young lad, mistakes are going to happen. It was difficult conditions for him with minimal testing in the off season, as has been well documented.
Minimal. Non-existent.
We had one sighting lap in the
Sorry.
thunderstorm.
Sorry, yes.
And he has, of course, now got the Duckham's livery on board, which is stunning and a real good effort by everybody at that team.
Kiss.
Oh, it is brilliant. It's
Yeah.
brilliant. And it's great to see that on the grid, and it's great to see that they've stuck with the Toka package because they have followed Adam Smalley to GTs, which he won at the weekend at Silverstone, and in a Duckham's livery car, or certainly his overalls were Duckham's, which I saw on the telly. So it's good to see that they are still on the Toka package somewhere. But as I say, he went off, and that caused a safety car. Pearson then came into the pits with an issue, probably power steering. That seemed to be the problem that was bugging him all weekend, unfortunately, which has really impacted his Jack Sears because you got to finish to score points to the Jack Sears effectively. Which is why Halstead currently sits second in the Jack Sears standings because he finished all three races, and that you've got to do that.
Yeah,
that's what you've got to do. Morgan then had a huge lockup under the restart, which allowed Huff, Moffat, and Turkson through just completely on his own on cold tyres after the safety car restart. Through the old hairpin, locked up, ran wide.
Seems to be a sign of that BMW that under safety car or under formation laps, they're not getting enough heat into those front tyres or not enough heat into the brakes.
I wonder if it's got anything to do with the new. They've got a lot of new stuff on that car,
Yeah.
and whether any of the new aero is deflecting air in a way that's stopping the tyres warming up, or if it's the new braking system or the new engine. I don't know. But yeah, that's something they're going to have to watch out for the rest of the season. Race three was probably the most exciting, by the way. So there was a lot to get through. So we'll rattle through a couple of bits and pieces. Osborne decided that the best form of attack for him was to attack the tyre barrier at the chicane. I think every lap, give or take, he hit the tyre stack on the inside of the chicane. Perhaps revenge for the fact he'd been in a tyre stack twice weekend already, but he was certainly working his way through the Napa spare parts bus. So yeah, good early indent into the budget for the season for
Just as well
him.
his dad owns the team, really.
Yes. Chilton was making good progress in this race after what had been a really disappointing weekend for him. It was good to see him coming back through the field and showing there is life in that old car yet. Sutton then made a very bold move for fourth. However, this was what you would call a perfect overtake, to be fair to him, on Colin Turkington. He waited for the door to open and he swept down the inside without any contact. Aggressive, but completely clean. And that's the side of Ash Sutton you want to see rather than the door handle banging side of things. We then saw Moffat make a fantastic move for the lead at Coppice. Hybrid really did seem to help him get this move done. And as someone that has teased and joked about the hybrid system continually on this podcast, it may well be time for me to retire the meme as on this evidence, hybrid does seem to make a difference. But with a caveat that Ingram set fastest lap in this race without hybrid. His fastest lap wasn't a hybrid lap. And the top three, Hill, Sutton and Hill, all finished in the top five each race with less hybrid in race 2 and 3. So let's just hold the champagne for now. But I do think, particularly in the midfield, we will see some better overtaking and better racing because of the hybrid. But let's just see what happens come Brands Hatch, shall we?
I think there is going to be a more tactical use of hybrid this season as well. We saw it when obviously those top three were battling in race 2, that Ingram used it at the best opportunity to get the best advantage just as soon as he got past Hill, and that gave him that little gap that he needed. But yeah, I think we did see a couple of overtakes this weekend that were completely down to the use of hybrid.
I would agree. Early signs are good, as I say. Moffat did really well this race. It's easy to be hyperbole about things, but this probably was his greatest touring car drive for me. He was not battling with a world touring car champion in Huff
Yep.
and a 4 times champion in Turkington, and held them both off superbly. Passed Huff really well, and they raced for a whole lap, basically, or half a lap side by side, Huff and Moffat. Great respect between the two drivers, and Moffat came out on top, which, okay, yes, you can say that he has the greater experience, Moffat, in the touring cars in recent years, but Huff is no slouch, and he's not getting past him isn't the easiest thing in the world. So really well played for Moffat to get through there. Next up, we had Morgan, which he was really suffering a little bit and was shuffled down the order by both Turkington and Sutton. Huff also started to fall back about this point, potentially car setup problems. There was suggestions that they hadn't got the Toyota quite set up right for this weekend, which is why Watson was having problems and why Huff started to fall back in this race. I also wonder if he slightly cooked the tyres in getting Morgan in the first place and then going after or fighting Moffat for that long as well. I do wonder if he just cooked the tyres slightly.
There was lots of chopping and changing the positions through this race, especially drivers maybe falling back a couple of positions and then still being able to make those positions back up. It really seems to be a good to-in throwing rather than one driver getting past and then just driving off.
Absolutely. Ingram then had an excursion through the gravel at the final S's, tapped by Hill, racing instant, no advantage gained by Ingram and had to take to the gravel rightly so. There's no problem with that at all. Sutton was trying to have a look on Colin, but couldn't get past in the closing stages, and then had to back off slightly towards the end as well, potentially another problem with the bonnet. It certainly looked like it was flapping on the onboard shot. But yeah, that's something for them to look into. And I will say as well that Turkington pushed Moffat hard in this race for the win, and Moffat defended doggedly just about the right side of the law and did incredibly well to keep him behind. And to be honest, Turkton never really got alongside Moffat. He closed the door at every opportunity, potentially, as I say, a little bit later times. But Colin, ever the man to bank points, didn't want to make anything too dangerous, which makes sense this early stage of the season, and as such, he was able to sit behind and take second. And towards the end, Ingram launched a real attack on Sutton. He is punchy, Ingram. He really is punchy this year, and I'm going to keep saying it. He just looked to force the issue whenever he could.
Yeah.
And I'm slightly surprised he didn't get past Sutton, albeit it's never easy to get past Ash Sutton.
No.
But yeah, if that's the standard of things to come, particularly from Sutton, Ingram, and Hill, who are together all weekend, this could be one hell of a championship. So just to go through the final 10 for the race 3, it was Aidan Moffat from Colin Turkton, Ash Sutton, Tom Ingram, Jake Hill, Rob Huff, Adam Morgan, Daniel Rowbottom in 8th, Josh Cook in 9th, and Dan Camish in 10th. And just quickly on penalty corner, Dan Rowbottom had to go back to the bus, get another stamp on his loyalty card. He was verbally warned for an incident with Andrew Watson. I don't know what the incident was. It wasn't shown on the telly. I imagine it was a push to pass or similar, but I'm purely speculating on that.
Yeah, the only other thing to add is that Camish was also having a nice attack of the tyre bundles at the final chicane, and his and Osborne's cars were almost identical in the damage they had towards the end of the final race.
Absolutely. I will just say again, massive well done to Moffat. I didn't expect to see that name this early with a race win.
No.
I thought that during testing he struggled the most out of the 4 Toyota drivers.
Yeah.
And qualifying, okay, they got it a bit wrong with the weather, not necessarily driver fault, but it kind of summed up where Moffat has been in the last couple of years in the touring cars to have that happen. And I think he alluded to himself in the interview afterwards that he has had a tough couple of years in the touring cars. He has struggled with where he's been and how he's sort of been lost in recent years. And he now thinks he's found a car that suits him. And on this early evidence, to be pick of the Toyotas this early into the season,
It's something you said on the way home, I think. It is the car that has been most like the Mercedes where he's had the most success in before.
Yes.
So I think he's going to feel comfortable with this car. And it certainly shows it when, as you say, he's outscored every other Toyota this weekend and sits quite nicely fifth in the championship.
Absolutely. Right, that sums up the racing action, I think.
Yes.
Let's do Driver of the Day awards next. We then do the rants, and then we can finish up on our prediction.
Do your
Do my rant, then we can finish up on the predictions to see us home. So let's start off with your Driver of the Day then. We're probably going to be agreed on this, but for the sake of argument, who was your Driver of the Day?
It is fairly easy on this one. It has to be Tom Ingram, taking pole and the fastest lap in race 1 and the win in race 2 and then 4th in race 3. It's a very good way to start a touring car championship and a weekend.
Yeah, I echo what you've said pretty much to the letter. Won 3 out of 4 sessions. You can't argue that.
No, certainly can't.
Okay, so who was your villain of the weekend?
Villain, although it may not have been his fault in race 1, I think it's going to have to be Sam Osborne.
Mm-hmm.
For a driver that is, again, in the Jack Sears this year, in a car that he's in, he should be dominating Jack Sears. Considering what we've seen the car do with Rowbottom, Camish, Sutton at the helm, to crash in qualifying, to crash in race 1, obviously so bad that he didn't even get out for race 2, and then only get back to 15th, considering there were 3 retirements as well in that final race. It's a really poor weekend.
Yeah, albeit I would give him a slight caveat that race 1 might not have been his fault.
No.
But yeah, I would agree. My villain of the weekend ties into the rant, so we'll come back to my villain of the weekend. We'll come back to that. Who was your surprise good?
My surprise good, it has to be Moffat, actually. I thought the Toyotas were going to do okay. I certainly didn't see him winning a race this weekend, and he made good, steady progress as well. finishing ninth, eighth, obviously getting reverse grid front row, and then confidently taking home that win. Yeah, a real surprise for me.
Okay, mine is Daryl DeLion. Coming into
Yeah,
the weekend, obviously we didn't know about the Duckham's sponsorship before this weekend. It was a surprise to everybody on
nor
Saturday.
did he.
But look, even if he had that on media day, did I think he'd get out of Q1? No.
No,
Did I think that he would be running in the top six for a long time in qualifying? No. Did I think he'd score points this weekend? No. Did I think he would complete 2 of 3 races? No. And he has done that. So I think that on the whole, it's a really good start to his touring car full debut season. Um, Scored good points in the Jack Sears. Didn't look out of place. Wasn't so far off the pace. He wasn't the back marker.
no.
Okay, he wasn't challenging at the front, but you don't expect him to be. Uh, yeah, I think all things considered, and also let's not forget this is a kid who's put up a lot of speculation, a lot of commenting. It can't be an easy environment. I don't care what you say. It can't be an easy environment for him, and he just doesn't seem to be phased by it. Or if he is phased by it, he's doing a very good job of hiding that. And
Got a
I
great
think this
poker
weekend,
face.
absolutely, I think this weekend he should be commended for how he's conducted himself, and I hope he sees the full season out. I always have to be a little bit negative and
Oh,
pessimistic in there somewhere, but look, what more could he have done this weekend? Okay, don't drop it in race 3, but heck, come on, he's a kid. He's going to make mistakes. He's a surprise good for me.
yeah, he's outscored both other Cooperers as well, who you could probably measure him against, certainly against Sumpton, who, although he's a rookie to the championship, getting used to that car again, I think he's going to have a good fight with those two for the rest of the season.
Absolutely. Okay, and then your surprise bad.
My surprise bad, I think it's going to have to be Watson.
Ooh.
I expected more. I don't know why. I just felt like there should have been more from him. To go backwards in each race is not what you want. Um, yes, okay, the setup might not have been right on the car this weekend, and I'm hoping that is the reason. And we're going to see a better outing from him at Brands. I know some people may feel it's unfair, but a 10th, a 12th, and a 12th, considering the other cars that are in the championship, I think he should be scoring top 10s near enough every round, with there only being 20 drivers on the grid.
No, I can understand it. I'm willing to give him a little bit of a pass as it's his first weekend in a new team,
Yeah,
a new car, etc. So somewhere who I don't really think can hide, and my surprise bad is Napa. I mean, they really dropped the ball in qualifying. Um, Osborne had as you mentioned earlier, a wretched weekend. Not all his fault, but some of it was.
yeah,
Rowbottom flat to deceive. Camish, every time he looked like he was making any sort of progress, he just stopped. And he had a very messy race 3 as well.
yeah.
Obviously, Sutton fine, yeah, but yeah,
You
it's Ash
expect that
Sutton.
from him.
You do, and Rowbottom, they're all into their second season with the team at the very least, and yeah, it's a big season for all of them. Napa are clearly pumping money into this. They clearly are trying to go and become the Btcc big boys. You can't have drivers that are going to keep making mistakes like we're currently seeing. And I know it's early in the season, and that's fine. There is that element to it, but for then the team to mess up qualifying as they did for Rowbottom and for Camish,
Yeah,
you know, for the bonnets not to be working, and that's not just on one car. All 4 cars throughout the weekend showed susceptibility to that. And actually, the bodywork seems to be coming off so easily. I mean, I mentioned the Hill and Sutton incident in race 3. It wasn't a massive hit by Hill to tear the rear wing up like that on Sutton's car.
no,
It wasn't a big hit. And we have seen slightly harsh black and orange flags in the past. If that's going to become a reoccurring theme on these cars, they could be in serious trouble.
yeah, yeah. Shall we get on to your villain and therefore ranks then?
Yeah, look, the villain of the weekend is Donington Park itself, okay? And that's a very sweeping statement because there's lots of people there this weekend who worked incredibly hard, the marshals, the track maintenance staff, etc., etc. And it's not easy. It's not easy. However, the traffic on the way in was appalling. I understand that you can't park cars in those conditions in the wet on the grass. However, it came as no surprise to anybody the conditions we had on Sunday. It had been forecast all week to be absolutely horrific, and there just seemed to be absolutely no plan in place whatsoever. The fact they even tried to open Starkeys for parking at the start of the day is astounding to me.
Can I add something onto that as well?
Please do.
Bearing in mind we were there a week and a half ago for Media Day,
Yep.
and the access that we had, we were able to get obviously the other side of the barriers and stuff. But on the infield, we walked up one of the hills on the infield, and it was soaking. It was already waterlogged then.
Yeah.
If you look at the forecast going forward, you know there's going to be more rain. You need to get those plans in place early,
Yeah.
because it's an event where you're going to see tens of thousands of people and possibly over 10,000 cars.
Yeah, and to add to that as well, like it's rained continually for about 9 months now. This can't be the first time that Old Hairpin has looked that bad in over the winter. So why are we? This because my next point. Why are we digging trenches on a race day? Why has that not been addressed in the winter month? It can't have come as a surprise that the bit at the bottom of a hill floods during heavy rain, and the water runs off the grass into that part of the track. Because that, to me, was the main thing that stopped us from racing. Was the rest of the track was probably okay. It was the standing water and the rivers down at that part of the track. And I say to have this is not a dig at the maintenance staff who did an incredible job on the day to even get us racing. To get that dug that quickly and even get us racing. But why have management not identified that as a problem? Now, there are heavy rumours at the minute that MSV are looking to buy Toka. That is a rumour that's out there at the moment. If they can't even get their drainage right at a circuit like this, then they can't be a serious, in my opinion, they can't be a serious contender to try and take over this entire championship.
Mm.
As we walked around Donington, there didn't seem to be any drainage in place at all. Not just at the corners, but in the actual infield of the track. The paths were soaking wet. The water was absolutely, the grass was absolutely waterlogged. And this is
as you come out from the walk under tunnel underneath the pit straight, you come out into a treed area, and you could see the water lying on top of the grass.
Yeah, and look, I get it. It's been abnormally wet. I understand that. I get it, but that as I say, it's been raining constantly for about all year, hasn't it? More or less, it's such a wet start to the year, and I get that slightly unlucky. And look, if they had all the drainage in place, they would look, lads, it's just so wet. You go, okay, this is freakish, fine, I get it.
Yeah,
I get it. But as I say, a top circuit, and this is a circuit that is one of the top circuits in the UK, to be digging a trench on the day of your biggest sport or your biggest motorsport series coming here on its opening round, it all looks a bit silly. Added to that, the updates were absolutely appalling throughout the day, because if you weren't stood by a speaker, you couldn't hear anything. There's no Wi-Fi, or there's limited Wi-Fi, and there's limited 4G capability, which means getting the updates to what's happening is very difficult to get a hold of. We were very lucky that a marshal came over and spoke to us and explained the situation, which is just testament to the Orange Army, to how friendly they are and how much they are, above everything else, racing fans themselves. As I say, this rant criticism is not to do with those kind of people. We're talking the people that make decisions up top.
They were sick of the fact that they got into the circuit, say 7:30 in the morning, signed on, got to allocated where their posts were going to be, get to their posts for a certain time, and then they were stood down first of all to 10 o'clock.
Yep.
And then from 10 till 12, they were even unsure on what was going on and what was happening.
Yeah. And this is it. So if they're not in the know, and then, as I say, it got to the point where I had to keep ringing other people at home to try and get an update to what was going on. We've got massive screens that are showing old races, which is fine. I get you trying to keep the crowd entertained, but nobody really wants to sit and watch that. Use those screens to give updates. So there's no point in Donington Park tweeting out what's happening when you can't access it, because there's no data or there's no Wi-Fi that circuit to access it. So it's complete. And again, with the parking, they were issuing parking things on Twitter. Well, if you're driving, you can't see that because you can't use your phone when you're driving. So that wasn't, as far as I'm aware, the parking information wasn't put out on Donington FM. And okay, it's a lottery of people are going to tune into that or not. But I mean, it's better than putting a tweet out. I just think the whole organisation was just, for something that was so well forecast, it wasn't freakish. It wasn't like it was supposed to be sunny and this rain came out of nowhere and caught everybody by surprise. It wasn't, we all knew we were going to get soaked this weekend. We all knew it was going to be raining.
Yeah.
And as I say, the icing on the cake for me is the fact that they even tried to park cars on Starkeys. Just sums up where, in my opinion, the organisation was this weekend. And that's not to on the flip side, I have seen that a lot of people claiming that some parking attendants, etc., were being abused, shouted at, sworn at because of the situation. That's not on either. There's no need to descend into that. It's, as I say, as I keep trying to make the point, this is not about those kind of people I'm talking about. I'm talking about the decision makers at the top and the organisers who just seem to get everything wrong this weekend.
Should we go some predictions?
Yeah,
That's
go on
much
then.
more entertaining.
Well, I will just finish by saying, at the end of the day, tickets have gone up. Tickets are more expensive this year than they have been before. The grid is smaller. There's not much on the infield to do in a big delay. And ultimately, you've got fans who are freezing and cold, who have queued over 2 hours to get in, who aren't getting any updates whatsoever. Yeah. Let's go on to some updates.
Yeah, let us know your thoughts and feelings below, and obviously on our social media pages as well. Can I just say at this point, thank you to everyone who has subscribed and liked and made comments on our new TikTok. Obviously, we were groundbreaking for this, going into it before the Btcc ever did. But the response
2 days before.
the response that we had from our TikTok update as we left the circuit last night was immense and something that we really weren't expecting or haven't seen before.
Can I just reverse slightly back onto my rant as well? Sorry, one more thing I want to mention is that going back to the organisation as well, I never, ever, 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 ever want to see a snatch vehicle while there's an open cockpit formula on circuit. And even your dog agrees with me here because
Reggie, shush.
Yeah, why that was not red flagged? It blows my mind that we just don't seem to learn. We just don't seem to learn. And a circuit where it's wet, it's bad enough in the dry, but a circuit where it's wet and you've got a series that isn't on the touring cars that often, and you're trying to do snatches with open cockpits. I don't like it in the touring cars or the Porsches, but I can live with it. Seeing a live snatch vehicle, and actually the safety car wasn't scrambled. I think the marshals were on track before the safety car's even scrambled, which is,
that for me
basic.
Is the bigger issue.
It's basic management of a race.
Timing.
Yeah, but that's basic management of a race.
Yeah.
And now with the electronic boards all around the circuit, there's no excuse for that. Anyway, predictions. I'll calm down now. Yeah, so we'll go through.
Away from you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll amend as we go here. So for pole, I get a point, which is excellent news for me because I went for Ingram. So happy days for me. That already puts me 1-0 up. For a win, I don't get any points because I went for Sutton, Hill, and Huff. So that's a bit disappointing.
Yeah.
You get no points either because you went for Sutton, Rowbottom, and what? Rowbottom. That's a really bold one in hindsight, isn't it?
Pole last year. You can see my thinking and my thoughts, but he really had a dire weekend.
Yeah, I'll say. Jack says we both got wrong as well. We both went for Pearson, and to be fair, we would have had a decent shot at that had he not had his problems with the car. Mikey Dover won that comprehensively this weekend.
Yes, he did.
In terms of my general predictions, I got 1 out of 3 here. So I didn't get Sumpton points. I didn't get a Cook podium, but I did get WSR to outscore Bristol Street Motors. So that's
if
good
only
for me.
you'd gone for Moffat, mate.
You managed to get 3 right here, which is incredible.
I got 4.
We'll get on to that. We'll go for the generals at a minute. So you got Toyota Gazoo Racing to score 30 points or more, which you just about squeezed. Well done.
Yes. They didn't have as good a weekend as I thought they would.
No, you've got Aaron Taylor Swift to have 3 points finishes, which with a 20 car grid is an absolute cop out, but fine.
I said to you, going through race through, I accept that was probably I should have gone for top 10s rather than 3 points finishes, but yes.
Okay, we'll give you half point for that, and that's fine.
No, full point.
No, it's fine. And then you get another point because of getting out of the car park predictions. So getting into the car park took us an hour and 45 minutes. Getting out of the car park, I timed it, took us 67 seconds.
Yeah.
You win that,
weren't you?
Well, because it's not, to quote Roy Keane, it's nonsense. All day. But that does mean that you have got a 4-2 lead at this stage, which, to be honest, given you've scored 3 on of your generals completely correct. To only be 2 points back for me, I'm quite happy about. I'll take that. That's not
Yeah,
too bad in the circumstances.
yeah. We
Do
need to
you
scrub
have?
up on our winners for next week or next time out, though,
Yeah,
don't we?
yeah. I'd have on pole, and Sutton's always
Yeah.
an option. Okay, so any closing comments, thoughts, things you want to say before we wrap this up?
It looks like it's going to be a good competitive season if it is only between three, possibly four, probably three drivers. I'm encouraged to see that hybrid looks like it may well work a lot better this season. It may
Mm-hmm.
not be perfect. It will depend and see how it develops throughout the season. Obviously, next time out at Brands, we're going to have that play a part in qualifying as well. So we may well see a shaken up grid. Ingram is up and ready for it. He wants his title back, and he wants to wipe that smile off of Sutton's face and make sure that he doesn't claim that fifth title this season. And all credit to De Leon and the work that's gone on behind the scenes to get Duckham's involved and to drive like he did on Saturday was immense, and then to back it up mostly for the day on Sunday. All credit to him, and I think he's got a lot more to show us this season.
Absolutely. The only thing I'm going to say, just to finish off on, is that it's a really good, as you say, start to the year in terms of competitiveness. That, and this is meant with all due respect to Moffat. That's we didn't see a surprise winner at all last year, unless you count Tom Chilton in the rain, which
Yeah, it's a lottery.
it is because it's great level, and he did really well that day to choose the tyres rightly
Yeah,
and fine. But we didn't see a surprise reverse free uh, race winner last year.
no,
And the fact we've got it in the opening round this year, I think is I say that's not a dig at Moffat, but last year every round was basically won by uh, either Sutton Ingram or Hill or
yeah,
Turkington or a BMW or Napa Ford. That was basically every round was dominated by those three, and to have already a new team, and it's a new team, and a different driver win, that's really encouraging for the season ahead.
yeah. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button below or wherever you get your podcast from. Get the bell on YouTube and do leave us a comment. Tell us your thoughts, feelings of how you see the season going from now on. We will, of course, be back with a Brands Hatch preview. That will be in just under 2 weeks' time. We won't be going to that one, so we'll be able to give you race updates after each race from home. And go and subscribe
Well,
to our TikTok if you haven't done already.
well, you will be able to.
Yes, I will.
I'm engaged that weekend, unfortunately. And I'll be doing my very level best to be keeping up to the action with TikTok, which is a great, obviously, new thing. Right. Bye.
Bye.